Hello, welcome. My name is Indigenous. You are here watching the Serpent and Dove podcast, back for another great episode, which I am very pleased and excited to bring. Today's topic will be Indigenous people and the enigma of racism, where this is all rooted. I'm going to explain it here. I've got some documentation. My website, serpentdovewisdom.com. I'm streaming live on twitch.tv. This will also be posted to various social media platforms such as YouTube, Facebook possibly. I will also have updates on Instagram. I am also on TikTok, so if you've not seen me yet, go ahead and check it out. It's definitely worth a check, so why don't we get into it here? I've got some documentation here, 25 images in the slide, which I would like to get into here. Now here you see the thumbnail, as well as some documentations. Now let me try to add some. Sorry, I'm not ready here. Okay, let's add existing. Sorry, I'm definitely not ready here, so oh well. Let me get myself in there. Okay, so here I am. This is the documentation I'm reading out of. It is 25 images. I've just finished compiling all of these from various articles, which I will also be posting links into the descriptions of the various social media websites which I draw from. And the topic, mainly I am speaking of the Indian Act, as well as the residential schools. That's kind of centered around all of this here. So why don't we read? I'm not sure if you can read that clearly, but I hope you can. Anyways, we're starting with the index and the order of hierarchy and how to use this eclectic source of information and articles. Now, when reading, bear in mind that parentheses and brackets such as square brackets will be used to denote the perspective and thoughts of the curator and author of this publication, which is myself, Aiden Knese. So, information contained within quotation marks largely would be used to denote the excerption of articles and information from the many online sites and links which will be included in the descriptions of social media platforms which will be used to publish these works. Now, I have gone over this very, very extensively. I have proofread it. There's still a few mistakes in here, I'm sure, but as for the legal aspects, I hope that all of this is well put together to the point in which I can publish online as an article. Now, I am quoting from historical facts and various authors who might be able to call these original works, and this may be subject to copyright, but I am hoping it is within the parameters of the legalities. But anyways, let me know if I'm off. Let me know if I if it is somewhat combative. I want to speak to the heart. I do not want this message to go over your head, whoever you are, wherever you are. So why don't we continue here? Paragraphs contained within the round brackets will be used to determine important or highlighted information regarding the understandings and underpinnings of the articles, writings, and excerptions. as well as quotations that I have filled in here. Now here you'll see the first square brackets used by myself. There had been great efforts and persuasions to keep the indigenous peoples all around the globe in a state of fear, anguish, poverty, and incognizance to self-awareness, as well as with the likes of the earth/land and nature. Now, you will notice that indigenous peoples here are capitalized. You will notice that the earth and the land is capitalized. Nature is also capitalized, and that is for very good reason, and we will find out shortly here, as we will come to see. Now, this work of progress is intended to unravel and free us of all of which we had previously been afflicted with in regards to cultural degradation and indigenous natural rights and inheritances. One word, one letter, one definition, and one mind at a time, I intend to reconciliate. I intend to be the medium here. That is where I see myself, and I do plan on getting through this live stream / recording. Today I only have time for 1 hour. There may be some inconsistencies. I may be needed elsewhere. I must note that I am a father before I am the author of Serpent and Dove, and without family, there is no Serpent and Dove, so I must state that clearly, so that there are no extreme expectations. I am who I am, and I am doing my best, and I am pressed. I am compelled from the core of my spirit and being, from my very heart. You can't see, but I'm pointing to my heart. So, why don't we continue here with the next slide? Now here you will see definitions, interpretations, underpinnings, and prerequisite knowledge. Now there are quite a bit of definitions that I have included here. Now we are not going to just simply read through the definitions one by one. Instead, rather, I will be, like I said, I will be including the documentation in the files. There will be access to it, so you can download them and do what you want with them. Publish it. I highly encourage all and any who watch this to share these public works, these publications. It's free, and it is a non-profit act of servitude to truth, and nothing less, nothing more. So, like I said, Indigenous was capitalized for a reason, and I have here the definition of what it means to be indigenous. Now, this is the actual literal definition from, I believe, the Merriam-Webster. I've just simply Googled the definition, and that's what I've gotten right there. So, indigenous, an adjective originating, growing, or produced in a certain place or region, and the synonym to indigenous would be native. An example of these wordings would be, I am native, not to Canada, but native to the land, now known as Canada. Now that is two different things. Canada and the land, two different things, not to confuse one of the other. Now, I will only go as far as to say that, and you see under Indigenous is the definition for an Indian, a native or an inhabitant of India or of the East Indies. Now, it is proper to call somebody from India an Indian, but it is not proper to call somebody like myself or anybody other than who is from India an Indian. Now, it is actually derogatory. It is belittling if you do. You're not going to call somebody from Scotland Irish, and you're not going to call somebody from Nova Scotia a British person. Now, it is very analogous to that. Now, I will go far as to say that. Now, if we continue, I would like to show you the definition, of what it is. Now, here you will see the people, and you've heard me speak of the land, all in capital letters, and that is any given land, territory, or continent. Example, Canada, or Europe, or the Americas. Now, each of these places have indigenous people that are native to that land, and I speak in the context of colonizers who have colonized this land, who have discovered it, plainly stolen the land. Let's put it simply. Let's not kid ourselves here. So, the land. Now we've got that out of the way. The laws. Now, not man's law, but God's law, natural law that we had lived by, we being the true inhabitants of the land. Now, you see it is in square brackets, meaning that I myself have given this interpretation to the terminology and the words and phrases that I will be using throughout this article and publication. So the laws, natural law and its constituent principles and statutes, which were intended by nature herself to be conducive to the betterment, health, well-being, and balance of society and individuals who share this mutual agreement of collective consciousness. Now we can go ahead and continue to the actual article, which I intend to lay out after we go over the literal definition of what a colonizer is. Now, why don't we read here? Colonize. Intransitive verb to form or establish a colony or colonies. To migrate to and settle in, occupy as a colony. To resettle or confine persons in or as if in a colony. Now, not only are these people who once plagiarized the land are known as colonizers, but the people who they've also colonized, as in confined, they have also turned us, the people, the true inhabitants of the land, they have turned us into colonizers so as to get us to buy into the false freedom that we thought we were going to receive. Okay, so now you see here in square brackets, although the actual and more accurate definition would be the unprecedented subjugation of sovereign individuals who are native and indigenous to the land of which they are of natural inheritance. Now, we've gone through a few words here which I believe it is necessary and essential to go back and go look at the definition of what it means to be sovereign. I've included it in this article here. I will not go back and forth, but instead rather I will simply read through it and assume that people will be studying for themselves, because the objective truth and facts are there. And you may come to find out that some of the objective truth that we thought was truth must be redefined and retransliterated in order for us to have a true understanding of what is taking place, and this here would be another example of that. And I have included, and we will read here also, one may consider the very process of the bodily function of the colon, considering that it's in every etymological sense in the word colonize. The colon is the last part of the digestive system. Now, the wordings there, understand that in the Indian Act, they used the word that they wished to assimilate native inheritances and values. They wished to consume us, so as to colonize us, so as to digest us. Now, I'll continue. It has a segmented appearance due to a series of sacules called haustra. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correct, but notice the nuances and correspondences here. Now, what does a colon do in even the literal sense that I will put a colon to denote to separate the hours from minutes? If you look at your time of day, you'll see a colon right there. It separates, it segments. Now that is the true definition of what it means to be a colonizer. You segment society, and you set apart in a bad way. So it extracts water and salt from solid wastes before they are eliminated from the body, and is the site in which flora-aided, largely bacterial fermentation of unabsorbed material occurs. Now, doesn't that sound very, very similar to the wordings in which they have used when they say, when they have looked upon the land which was untouched, they have said, this is unabsorbed material, and they just could not help themselves. They had to diverge. They had to coerce natives into wanting what we have today. Now, why don't we continue? Unlike the small intestine, the colon does not play a major role in absorption of foods and nutrients. About 1.5 liters or 45 ounces of water arrives in the colon each day. Now, thus, colonizers who wish to assimilate any sovereign indigenous individuals have intentions to consume and obliterate the virtues and principles of the indigenous peoples of the land of which they wish to colonize, that is, to segment. That is the true meaning and definition of a colonizer, bearing resemblance to the very bodily function of the colon itself. Hence the etymological root word of colon and the word colonize. Now, with that prerequisite knowledge, we may continue on with the article without any undue inconsistency not being unraveled predeterminately. Some more definitions. I assume people will be spending their time with this. Now, we may come back to this, but why don't we go all the way up to the start here? You will see many definitions which I include here. Now here I refer to the preface. We are called Indians because Christopher Columbus thought he had discovered India in the times that he had actually discovered what was a pre-existing and predominantly inhabited society of holistic peoples. That was us, the indigenous peoples, now known as the early Indians. Now, they are known as the early Indians. I'm not calling them the early Indians, but consequently, that is what they are known as. Therefore, I have included that. Thus, the beginning of healing and reconciliation starts with the self-respect of the indigenous individual. Now, notice that indigenous and individual is capitalized. Thus, you will find a literal definition at the beginning of the article. I do recommend everybody go back and check it out. Right now we are live, so you are only watching it as I am going through it, but check it out on YouTube. You will find the documentation. Now, that is to say that we must reclaim all that was adulterated and made profane. in all that had been desecrated and diluted of its sacred origin, and that is our sovereignty. Those things are symbols, logos, words, meanings, interpretations, definitions, sanctioned duties, teachings, beliefs, etc. All of these things once had a sacred origin, but now are dualistic. At the surface, they are now dualistic, hence they have been diluted. There are false interpretations, there are negative connotations to these things, and we will come to learn that here. Now, as I have expressed previously on this show, that is Serpent and Dove, that truth is all that is, and lies and deception can only surround and attempt to dissuade from its significance. And imagine if truth at its core, at its surface, is as it is, and you have all of this overlay, all of these layers that we have to unravel and dig through, because this realm has been just made a desolate wasteland at its fundamental core, on the surface, and at the core, which is the fundamental teachings which I intend to convey here in this article. So, why don't we go on to the next page here? Now this is excerpt from facinghistory.org, The Invention of the Indian. I believe this is a book, but I do disclose that for purely educational and purposes of critique, I have included excerptions from various articles, such as one from facinghistory.org. Now these, I don't see how somebody could call that their original work and have it copyrighted. Now, one second here. One second. Pardon the little break there. Like I said, I am a family man. I am a father before I am a teacher. So, all things considered, why don't we continue here? Let me continue with this quotation here. In writing about the new people they met, the Europeans assumed a very clear hierarchy between the superior West and the somewhat inferior New World. To begin with, the Europeans, who had developed a written culture early on, tended to view the history and culture of peoples without a written language as inferior. Since indigenous traditions were not recorded in writing, they were deemed unreliable, mythological, a fiction. Now we're talking about oral history here. And the history books, as we will come to understand, are based on the wars and who were victorious in these wars, and anything that is founded upon violence, coercion, and deception which is all of these wars, is not truth, not the true history. And if we have any holistic, intellectual, heart-based knowledge, we will come to that conclusion. Of course, in this article here as well. Now, here, I have included the definition of an aboriginal. Now, ab as an aboriginal, word-forming element, meaning away from off, down, so denoting disjunction, separation, departure, from Latin ab, prep, off, away from, in reference to space or distance. Also of time, from high root, apo, off, away. Also the source of Greek, apo, off, away from, Sanskrit, apa, away from, Gothic is af, English of, off. Okay, so, thus, to denote any indigenous individual as being ab-original is to revoke them of their originality. Thus they are ab-original, away from original. Now you see the words that has been used against us, and they have gotten us to buy into this deception largely. So it is used to denote and revoke them of their originality and their origins, their inheritance, the land, their virtues, etc. Now, let's move on here. Halfway through the programming here. One aspect of the enigma of the Indigenous is that we must define an Indian in today's circumstance in order to legally, truly, and lawfully be fully recognized as the people, or, more accurately, people of the land, as opposed to prior attempts to further marginalize native indigenous by containing them within an undesirable state of self-awareness, entirely self-serving to the wants and desires of the manipulators, and controlled hierarchies of institutionalized systems which continue to operate and run to this day in Canada. Now, not like the residential schools which I speak of, which would be the more extreme of these institutions, which seek to just devalue Indigenous people because it's analogous to somebody who grew up not having what they wanted as a child, and they see these Indigenous people having everything that they want and need, and they just cannot stand to see it. It is very analogous to that. So, institutes, statutes, mandates, and legislatures I speak of. Now, we can definitely say in today's circumstances, we are not free as much as we wish to be, in a lot of senses in terms of taxation and special permissions, privileges, and treaty rights or constitutional rights, which are not the same as natural law rights, which are God-given. And when I say God-given, it's given from our higher self. And when I say, I've said this before on this channel, if you have not, if this is your first time watching it, I do recommend that you go back to the start, because I speak of a lot of prerequisite knowledge that even go before this article and the underpinnings and the definitions which I have included in the beginning of this article. Now, just as this article has prerequisite knowledge, this entire programming, as in the entire episode of the Indigenous people and the enigma of racism, also has prerequisite knowledge, which would be the entire previous set of episodes, which I already did publish. So, again, go check it out. It's definitely worth a check. So, why don't we continue here? Indigenous individuals have been subvertly and covertly duped and manipulated into identifying falsely with the colonizers and their ways, who have even turned on their own people, which we may come to understand if we would like to be free as the people. So, when I say this, I mean that back in the olden days, with the original treaties, they had convinced the indigenous people that the freedom that they were giving up for their natural law freedom was better. They were convinced, either coercively, forcibly, or by reason. Some have simply bought in, some have been bribed. It's not just a blanket statement, or it wasn't just done in one way. It was done in this complex labyrinth of legislatures and deals and treaties with individual tribes. Of course, they had to if they wanted to get to where we are today, and that is what I attempt to unravel. Why don't we move on here? Now you notice here in square brackets, meaning that I myself have included this out of my own words and volition. So, a deep esoteric understanding and interpretation of indigenous people and what it means to be an indigenous individual, that is, caretakers of the earth, in accordance with your sanctioned office and duties relative to your geographic locations and tribes, its environment and atmosphere, its animals and plants, its sciences and laws. Now, when I say that, if you notice in Vedic astrology, that specific geographic area, that's the sciences and laws that they had to work with. With the Hopi and with the Native Americans, they've also had their own sciences to work with and to master. And that, in and of itself, is another debate and focal point. So, having that being said, these focal points of interest regarding the individual are entirely up to the individual to be of respect and reverence. That is, to diagnose by way of gnosis, respect, meaning, now this is the definition of what it means to respect yourself, and it means to look at oneself again, and the etymological root of the words respect, which are re plus spectare, re meaning again, as in repeat, and spectare as in spectacle, which means to look at, or to spectate. Now you'll hear the nuances there, it's all in the wordings. So, what it means to respect yourself, if you cannot respect yourself, how can you respect the earth and its inhabitants? These are laws encompassing principles of mentalism within natural law. Also principles of cause and effect, which encompass parameters set in place for our betterment and well-being. Such virtues as we have seen since before the settlers and colonizers have sought to destroy as they progressed into our lands. Now you'll see here, 1764, the Treaty of Niagara. Where we came from, before this treaty, we were original peoples with an already structured society in harmony with natural law. Not man's law, not constituted law, not the Bill of Rights, not any of that, but natural law. Natural law being the principle of mentalism, which is the first principle. And then we have correspondence, vibration, gender, polarity, etc. There's 7 principles, and the 8th one being the principle of care. True care, which would be the generative principle, which means what we work, the works, will be based off of what we care about. And as builders, we will either be building a society that will either lift us up or tear us down progressively. So why don't I continue here. We had already in place a system of peace, but their agenda was to convince us that our already predominantly natural ways were insufficient for the likes of man. But of course we learn in today's circumstance that this is not the case, considering the current human condition with society in general, which we can admit is not exactly what we wish it to be. It is not exactly desirable, and that is largely due to tenets of Satanism such as moral relativism, meaning that laws are allowed here, or you could do this here, but you can't do it there, with these state borders or provincial borders being the denominating corresponding factor here. So why don't we continue here? On to the next slide. Now, I don't know why it simply went back to the first one here. I am missing some slides, so I am going to have to go over this. They're all here. They're all here. All 25 are here, and I am not able to go through all of them, and I need to figure out what's going on here. Now I'm just going to count this quickly because something's going on. You know, that's kind of to be expected here. This is very hard hitting, and I'm honestly not surprised that there are little technical inconsistencies like this. So let me count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. We are missing 10 slides altogether. I am going to attempt here live on the show to try to bring us back to a medium here. Now, if you will bear with me here, I'll see what I can do. Open. Okay. Okay. Now, let's see if that was to any effect. I will attempt to go back to where we left off. Now it only allows for 15. I am sorry, I'm not prepared here. Instead, I am going to do this. Now that is a better view here. Okay, that's much better. I hope you can read that well. This is the next slide. So, here we have Indians, Indigenous individuals of early Canada who were sold to believe that the society in which they had presumably thought was better than the one they had already predominantly erected and built up, having natural law as the foundation of which the true houses of liberty and freedom once stood. Thus, the assimilation and integration of indigenous peoples was no less than a consumption of native values and inheritance. That is to strip the people of the very things which construct their entire lifestyle and ways. Now, you can go and read for yourself. You can go and check this out for yourself. It gets interesting, you know? It gets very... Just gonna bring this up down here. It gets very blatantly downright disrespectful and just... It's gory, you know? The history. And if we cannot simply face this history, then there is not much hope for freedom. And there's a big reason why there are a lot of controversies surrounding Native and Indigenous people in today's circumstance in regards to what has taken place in Nova Scotia with the lobsters and the treaty rights that were broken. Now listen, the treaty rights were never intended to be natural law rights. They cannot replace natural law, and they were given by man, and if they were given by man, they can be taken away by man. And in every case, man has the right also to bear arms, to set up forces, to take up arms and defend our natural law rights. Not just treaty rights, not just constituted rights, but human rights. Now there's a big, big difference between those three things I have stated, and there is no gray area between. There is no... This is a white and black scenario. So, having that being said, why don't we continue here? Where were we? I have a bit of a runny nose. So I was sick today. I couldn't make it to work. Yeah, it's just one of those days, so don't mind me. Therefore, being a proxy to what was natural law, the colonizers set forth to implement their own falsely legislated laws which served only to further contain and devalue indigenous peoples. Not to mention that the Canadians at any given time did not have any sense of true freedom compared to indigenous people. Thus, the indigenous were manipulated into thinking that they were buying into something better than what they had in some regards. Now that is not a blanket statement, but a very generalized one, and I understand a very controversial one, which is why I've taken the time and effort to literally define and construct this article in every definitive and etymological sense, so as to not foster any contradiction or any controversy when it comes to these things. So, the many labyrinths of legislature and statutes surrounding indigenous peoples and their relations with the false authoritarians of the Canadian federal government are intended to confuse, destabilize unlawfully, control food supplies. If you study, you will find some brutal things when it comes to the food that they've given, and to foster unsafe and undesirable conditions for daily life and sustenance of the people, whoever the people may be, either those who appear physically white but have native inheritance but also are native to their own land, as well as with the early ancestors who roamed the land, now known as Canada. Now that is very ambiguous in nature, but that's the condition we are in, and if we do not understand these things, we do not understand ourselves, we don't know where we come from, then we don't know where we're going. We don't know the land that our feet are planted on, but we need to. And if we don't, it is in our karmic duty to fulfill that that underpinning, that obligation. This is a moral obligation. So, we are 45 minutes into the broadcast here. I believe I would just like to stop there so as to take my time. This will take as long as it needs to. And this will be an ongoing battle, an ongoing continuation, considering it has been over 150 years in the making. I do not expect just one 45-minute clip to undo all of it, but it's a start. So that is what I attempt to unravel here. Now, why don't I just start with just speaking a little bit about myself. Now my upbringing is not the best, much like most Indigenous peoples. Understanding that really, let's start with the residential schools. The last one closed in, I believe it was 1995, 1996. My parents, a lot of my friends' parents, have been plagiarized in these schools, these residential schools. And scientific psychology states that these genetic dispositions, which can go on to influence the psychology and mentality of offspring of anybody who had been traumatized, it takes 2.5 generations for it to naturally be weeded out. Now, if we consider that, I am not even 1 generation away, but I can say for certain that I have unraveled these layers within myself. Considering that, I wish, it is my desire to influence youth, influence people of all ages. It is my intention and my goal to foster right action, wisdom, knowledge, and heart-based intellectuals. I wish to reach an audience in which unity may be developed, and simply I would just like to just state my background and say that, if I don't, I'm skipping steps. There are steps in between. In order for me to get to where I want to go, I need to state these things, as combative and uncomfortable as it may seem. It is essential. So why don't I start by saying my history, my background, where do I come from? I want to let you know the full extent of who I was, who I am now, and who I wish to be in the future. Now, in the past, I say these things because I wish to influence people of the same criteria, and people of that criteria are people who were into drugs, into hard drugs for that matter. I'll just be flat out and say it. It's because lawfully I have the right to address these things and call people out and say that you can do this, and even people watching, people in your family who maybe you are not one of these people, but you have people in your family who come close to this criteria with a background of drug use, of trauma, of alcohol use. I would say that I was indulged in crime as a youth. Not anything extreme, but I definitely was not who I am today. And I will not become who I wish to be if I do not address these things. So, all things considered, that is the full extent of where I come from. This is the crowd of people who I believe I will be touching the hearts and the minds. So, having that being said, we've got 10 minutes left in the programming here, and I just want to state that no matter what state you are in, no matter how far down the rabbit hole you may be, no matter what big pile of mud that you might sit in, that mud being self-affliction, karma, it doesn't matter, you can come back from it, and you can combat these things. There's nothing you can't come back from. Now imagine that there are people much worse than that, and they have come back, and this of which I speak of is the majority, or might I say, the minority. But we are not the minority. Indigenous people, the majority of Indigenous people who are of this background of drug use and trauma and alcohol use, are not the minority. So stop looking at yourself that way and start using your imaginative capacity to better yourself like I did. And I can say that I have the right to say that because I was once there. I was once in a position where there was only two ways to go, either up or down. And when I say up or down, I mean life and death. I chose the latter, and I can only hope, I can only inspire, and I can only influence other people to do the same. Now, I understand you who may be watching may not be that person, but undoubtedly you know who that person is, and it is the moral obligation to get this message to that person. As ambiguous and uncomfortable as it may seem, that is the current human condition which I speak about previously. And that is, these are the warriors that we have. These are the majority of people that we have to work with. And if we cannot fix them, then how do we expect to truly be free? How do we expect to love and respect ourselves? You know, they say it takes a village to raise a child. And that's true. We need each other. We cannot be confined to the four walls of this house, and we cannot be confined to the mirrors which only seek, the illusion of mirrors which only serve the purpose of reflecting back to us our unconscious mind. Now, I have spoken of the unconscious mind in my previous lectures. Go and take a look if you have not already. I highly suggest it. Now, as you can see, I have my social media links here. Check me out on Facebook, Instagram, Library. I'm on TikTok as well. I try to be very proactive in that regard, and I can only hope that I am being straightforward enough and clear enough so as to speak to the heart. I always and only wish to speak to the heart. That's what I intend to do here on this broadcast with Serpent and Dove, the podcast. So, how did I get here? How did I go from A to B? From desolate and self-loathing and apathy? How did I get from there to certainty, self-appreciation, self-realization, self-actualization, and self-respect? How did I do that? It took willpower. It took determination. It took discipline. It took right action. It took the right mind. Most of all, it took the imagination. It first had to have been real in my own mind. Nobody was going to give it to me. In fact, nobody has given it to me. I've given it to myself. I have given myself permission to want it, to deserve it, and I've stopped saying that I am the minority. I am the majority. Major. I am major. I am significant. Now I'm not saying do positive affirmations, because that's something else. There are easier ways to do things that take less effort. So, having that being said, I only hope to reconcile and be the medium here. My disposition on an astrological and mental psychological level is that I am the medium. I am the intermediate corresponding factor that would be the call to action. In some regards, I'm just one man. I can't do everything, but I can do something. And I believe I am called to help in certain regards. I believe I am here for a reason, only for specific people. And whoever those people may be, wherever they are. With that being said, there are soul groups. There are soul contracts before the boundaries of time and space. We have agreed with every single force. We were in agreement and concurrence with every single force of the universe. In fact, if it were not so, we would not be here, because those are the conditions of which it is in order for us to obtain a body here in the active realm, understanding that corporeal spirits are passive and have little to no influence here in the active realm, here in Midgard, here on Earth, where boots on the ground is in effect and is the only corresponding factor of which we may obtain our goals here in reality. Now, if you can wrap your mind around that, I hope you can. If not, go back and watch the prior episodes. It will give you a good understanding. Now, I would just like to end off on a note, and that is to thank everybody who has watched thus far, and I can only hope that there would be more people in concurrence with what I have set forth here, and I hope that people will share this, get this out there, get the message out there, and speak your own message. Now, what I have laid out here today is objective truth based in factual, experiential, and practical, provable sciences and experiences, events that took place on the ground here on Earth in physicality and reality. And it is not my own subjective opinion. In no way have I stated my opinion. This is not just what I think or believe. It's not a belief. It's not a religion here. It's not anything other than objective truth. Now, I have explained the difference between subjective and objective truth. Now, myself, as being the subject, I subject myself to the objective truth. I submit. And I can only influence other people to do the same. Now, in order for us to be a collective society of truth, based in natural law, based in rights, based in human rights, we must first be individuals. Now, why don't I show you here what I mean? I'm going to go all the way back to the definitions very quickly to end off. Individual. I am looking for individual. Now, I had it somewhere. I don't think I could find it right away as of yet off the top of my head, but that will be all for today. We have approached 1 hour, so thank you for watching.